2024 is the year of Shadow the Hedgehog. I'm sure we all know this. Sega released this campaign at the beginning of the year, announcing that this was Shadow's year. But up to this point, we haven't really gotten anything Shadow the Hedgehog related. In October, we get Sonic X Shadow Generations, and in December, we get Sonic 3. Now, to celebrate the year of Shadow, you see I got this really cool Shadow-themed shirt, along with my Shadow the Hedgehog King Eyes chain. Grab yourself one down in the description below. Use code TitoTheOG for 10% off. I decided to make my own custom Shadow the Hedgehog action figure based off of his Sonic Adventure 2 appearance. Now, this is probably one of my favorite customs just because it's a complete overhaul of this Jakks specific Sonic action figure. I completely changed the body, and all the parts are custom made, and even, well, the shoes are a reference to another figure of Shadow the Hedgehog, which I actually have right behind me. So for my custom Shadow action figure shoes, I 3D scanned my Joyride Shadow the Hedgehog action figure, and I grabbed the model and I slapped him onto the Jakks specific Sonic, or my custom Sonic Adventure 2 Shadow figure. And honestly, I really like how it came out. It's a really cool reference. I could have just used the Shadow shoes from like modern Shadow, but it just doesn't feel the same. I wanted to have some retro look to them. But for this video, I decided to actually try and do more, I guess, behind the scenes stuff instead of just straight up going to painting my printed parts. I kind of show a little bit of my printing stuff, taking it off of the printer, sanding it, all of that non-fun stuff. So that way you guys can kind of get a little informed on how I do my work. So without further ado, guys, let's jump into how I made this action figure.
Evil Hedgehog. Introducing Shadow from Sonic Adventure 2. Now you can choose to be Sonic, the good hedgehog, and try to save the world, or Shadow, the evil hedgehog, and conquer it. What kind of hedgehog are you? Rated E for everyone, only on Dreamcast.
Alright, so first off, I grabbed Shadow's model from Sonic Adventure 2 and I slapped it into Blender, and I did all that good stuff to make him into a 3D printable model by merging his mesh into one solid object. And you can see I got all the details. I got the Joyride shoes, I got his cool cuffs, and I went ahead and I printed that out on my Elegoo Saturn 8K. And you can kind of see here that I'm including more footage of my printer stuff. Here you see me getting the prints directly off the bed. And I have to put them in some isopropyl alcohol to wash. That way it gets off all of that excess resin. After that, I put it to cure for about maybe like 3 minutes. And I orient it differently like once or twice after that 3 minutes is up. Now the fun part, I have to sand off all of the support blemishes. Probably the most time consuming part, but it's worth it in the long run for a smoother finish on your print. And then I prime the surfaces. Once I prime them, I have my parts all set up here on my table, and it is time to get started painting. I am starting first with the cuffs and shoes, and here is the gold that I use for these parts. Vallejo Ochre Brown, I'm not sure how to say it. And then Vallejo Gold. I like to water down my paints with water, that way they can, go on a bit smoother. This will require like a few more coats, but it'll look a lot better in the long run. Once I get those brown coats on there, I go over them again with the gold paint, and it really brings out the color of the gold very nicely. Next, for the red, I like to use this Vallejo model color Scarlet color, as it's a very vibrant red and it goes on very nicely in about 2 coats. I will have all of the paints and equipment and stuff that I use down in the description below via Amazon affiliate links, so if you go ahead and purchase any of those items, they do help me out. After I finish the red, I get the black and I paint all the black parts on the shoes. I like to paint in order of lighter color to darker color, but it also just depends on, what I'm feeling in that moment, what I want to paint. Now I get little dabs of black paint and I dot all of his air shoes exhaust holes just to add some more depth to them and make them look like they're actual holes and not just shallow areas of gold. And then I get this Vallejo game color visceral red, and I use it on all of the tongues of the shoes and gloves to add like a darker portion to them. The old artworks had these little dark red tabs to them, and I think they just look better and it really feels like Sonic Adventure 2. Now for the head. Since the head is primarily black, I can just use the red however I want without having to worry about it getting into parts I don't want it to, since I'm just going to be going over it with black. So I go over the red parts with a fat brush, that way I can just get it done a lot faster. Once those bigger parts of his head are done with red, I go in with a smaller tipped brush and I do his eyeliner. Once I did that, I used a fine tip brush and I traced the parts of the red that I got outside the lines. That way I can go in later with the bigger brush and paint the rest of the head. I sculpted the red details in on the model itself, so that way it was a little bit easier to paint, and that way the outlines kind of acted as like guidelines, so I know exactly where the red spots are supposed to be. So that was really helpful because before I didn't have these lines sculpted in and I had to freehand all of these red spots. Now here are the two colors I use for his skin tone. I got these both from Walmart. This is the Apple Barrel Matte Apricot and Multi-Surface, or the Folk Art Multi-Surface Pueblo. Since Sonic Adventure 2 Shadow Skin is pretty orange, I used primarily the apricot color and I used a tiny droplet of the other color, and I mixed them pretty well until I got a nice color I really liked, and then I went at it with the skin. Keep in mind that the footage only shows me doing one coat of each color paint, but they all typically take about 2 coats each. After the skin, I forgot to record how I did the eyes, but I basically did a dark red outline and then I dotted red inside of it, so you can see he kind of has like an outline around his eyes. And I wanted to match the game texture just like Sonic Adventure 2 Sonic, and I did the black pupil and then I used a dotting tool for the other details, just so I can get it to match that white shine on top and that gray shine on the bottom, which I really love. Now that the eyes are done, I was able to paint the rest of the head. And that concludes Shadow's head. Let's move to the body. Now for his body, I used a Sonic the Hedgehog Jakks body, just because I feel his proportions match Sonic Adventure 2 Shadow a lot more, and I dyed it black. And here's how you do it. So what you're gonna need is some ultra powerful nail polish remover, this RIT synthetic dye graphite, and these, well, you don't need these, but a cotton ball. Alright, so first let's take off our body parts. Now that that's done, we're going to get our nail polish remover and start scrubbing away on his stomach print. That way you don't see it underneath the dye. Once that's done, we're going to go ahead and get our synthetic dye. You want to make sure it says synthetic so that way it adheres to the plastic a lot better. If you get the standard one, it won't work that well. You're going to want to bend his legs and such so that way his joints are exposed. You're going to want the dye to adhere to the joints so that way they're not blue underneath. You're going to get some boiling water, and I poured about half of the bottle in there and I plopped my bodies in there. I used a wooden skewer to stir everything, and you can see already right there that the dye is already adhering to the plastic, so that's a good sign. I left it in there for about 5 minutes and I took them out, and you could see they're dyed pretty well, but the other joints that were hidden didn't dye. So I adjusted the angles and I dyed them again for another 5 minutes, and as you can see, the bodies came out perfect. I applied a gloss coat over the body, but you don't really need to do that. You could just use a few coats of matte. And then after that, I started painting his stripes on his arms and legs. For some reason, whenever you dye things, paint doesn't go on it very well, so it'll take quite a few more coats than usual. I had to do like 3 or 4 coats of each, and it still wasn't showing up all too well in the end. I think I just needed more like matte coats before I started painting. And then I painted the little chest fur that I printed white, and I was able to glue it onto his chest. Once I glued that on, it was time for me to add all of my finishing coats. I like to use a gloss coat over the main parts, just because it has like a thicker layer of protection over it, and then I go over that with matte finish. So that way it still has that matte finish I like, but the protection of the gloss coats. Now with all those parts sealed, I can now put together the ultimate life form.
Now the ultimate life form is complete. Project Shadow, as I would call it. So since Sego wasn't really doing much for the year of Shadow, I decided to take matters into my own hands and make this guy. And like I mentioned earlier, he is probably my favorite custom that I made. Just because the Sonic Adventure 2 character models are some of my favorite. Could just be that I'm blinded by nostalgia, but they're really awesome looking. And I really tried to capture that in here. I don't know if you guys noticed some of the little things that I did, such as keeping his slap bracelet inhibitor rings. I thought that was a very funny detail, which I think was just chalked up to like a texture issue on the model. But I wanted to keep it as faithful as possible. And even making the little flap, the tabs on his cuffs a darker red on the inside. I like those minor details. They really just set this guy apart from modern Shadow. I did release this guy on my Etsy page a while back, and they all already sold out. I do still restock some unpainted kits occasionally, so I hope that now that you guys are watching this video, it will kind of help make the painting process a bit easier, especially when it comes to dyeing the body. I feel like that was the best thing I've done, mainly because there is zero paint rub, and I know that is a very big issue that a lot of Sonic customs have. Is whenever you move his legs and everything like that, the paint on it just rubs off completely and you see the color underneath. And I wanted to completely avoid that, so using the dye was honestly the best thing. Also, join my Discord server where you can get sneak peeks to all of my projects that I'm working on. I even have a news channel where you can get notified on all of the current Sonic merch that is releasing. I hope you guys enjoyed this video on the ultimate life form, and I will see you guys next time.